What's going on, everybody? This is Andre here, filling in for Kevin, and in this video, I'm going to be giving you my first impressions of the Honor X8a 5G. So without further ado, let's get started. Now before we actually get to the phone itself, let's take a quick look at what comes in the box. So as you can see up here, Honor X8a 5G. So starting off in this packet here, we get a typical quick start guide, SIM card removal tool, and it actually does come with a phone case too, which is definitely nice considering at this point in 2023, not very many phones actually come with a case. So if you are someone who likes to use a case on your phone, this is definitely going to be a good thing for you. In addition to this, we also got a charging cable. Looks like it's USB 2.0 to USB-C, and then a wall adapter as well. Now, clearly here, this is not a US wall adapter, so if you are in the US, definitely keep this in mind. But moving on to the phone itself, with the Honor X8a 5G, for what it is, we are getting a pretty nice display here. With this phone, we're getting a 6.5-inch 90Hz TFT LCD display with a 720p resolution, a PPI of 270, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So again, in general, for what it is, I do think we are getting a pretty nice display here. At 6.5 inches, it is definitely on the larger side. So if you're someone who's on your phone a bit more, maybe you're doing lots of web browsing, using social media, playing games, watching videos, if you are on your phone a lot in general, with a larger display like this, you will get a pretty good experience. And then when it comes to image quality, on one hand, it's kind of too bad we're only getting 720p here, because at this point in 2023, we're starting to see so many phones, even entry-level phones like this, that have 1080p resolutions. And while it's not exactly a deal breaker at this point, if you are consuming a lot of content like watching videos, for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, with only a 720p resolution, you might feel like you're missing out a bit. But in general, despite it being 720p, I do think things look decently sharp here, so overall, for more light occasional use, I definitely think it will get the job done. In addition to this, the display is also decently bright, so definitely great there. And with the 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother, and this will make the phone feel more premium to use. So overall, if you're looking for a really affordable phone for more light casual use, and you do want to make sure you have a good display, then I do think this phone will be a pretty good choice. Now for the storage, with the Honor X8a 5G, we're getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so definitely plenty of storage here. For the average user, you're probably not even going to come close to filling this up, and for a more affordable device like this, I do think 128GB is definitely impressive. Now to put this into perspective, even in this day and age, with stuff like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger as time goes on, we're still seeing plenty of entry-level phones that have really not that much storage. Although thankfully 32GB is getting much less common, and I haven't personally seen a 5G phone that has storage that small. It is pretty common to get only 64. So in general, for a more entry-level device like this, getting 128GB of internal storage is definitely impressive. Now for security features, with the Honor X8a 5G, we are getting Face Unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. So definitely great to get both options. But real quick, let's give the fingerprint scanner a try. There we go. One more time. And there we go. So as you can see, real fast and responsive. No issues at all. And again, remember, this phone does have Face Unlock too. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the Honor X8a 5G, up front, we get a water drop notch designed for the selfie camera. Definitely not as nice looking as a hole punch, but in this price range, this is still pretty common. This camera is 8 megapixels. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. And then for video, this phone does have a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. So no 4K here, but considering this is more of an entry-level device, I wasn't really expecting it. So overall, I definitely do think we have a pretty impressive camera setup here. Again, unfortunately, despite at least having a macro camera, we're not getting an ultra-wide camera here, so if you are someone who really likes to get those wider angles, then you will be disappointed here. But with a 50 megapixel main camera, although I haven't personally used the camera yet, considering this is a first impressions video, I am expecting the photo quality to be pretty good. So in general, if you're someone who maybe doesn't need a super high-end, top-of-the-line camera, but you do like to get the occasional nice photo here and there for that kind of use, considering this is more of an entry-level device, I do think the camera setup we're getting here will get the job done. Now taking a look at the camera here, definitely pretty standard, and again, unfortunately there's no ultra-wide camera, but at least we do get portrait mode in both the front and rear cameras. I know it does sound like a pretty common thing, but keep in mind there are actually some phones that only have portrait mode in the rear camera for some reason, but again, portrait mode does work in the front-facing camera too, so definitely nice to see there. Then from here, as you can see down in these rows, we got aperture, so you can change the lighting in your pictures. Then we got night mode, regular photo and video mode of course, and then if we go to the More tab, as you can see, we got a bunch of different modes here. So Pro mode, Panorama, HDR, time-lapse, stickers. We got the macro mode right here in case you're wondering how to use that. Dual view so you can take a picture of both the rear camera and the front camera. High res. So keep in mind by default in normal photo mode, like a lot of phones that have really high megapixel cameras, you're not actually going to be using the full 50 megapixels, but if you do want a really high resolution 50 megapixel photo, you can use high res mode. Also keep in mind photos taken in this mode do take up a bit more space, but in my experience, especially with 128 gigabytes of storage, it's not really going to be that much of a difference. So if you want to take a bunch of high quality photos, I would personally just feel free to use it as much as you want. But maybe if you are someone who's constantly taking pictures, you might want to get a micro SD card so then it doesn't take up a ton of space on your phone. But just keep in mind, in case you're wondering, again, the photos taken with high res mode are a bit larger. And then finally, we got story mode. So as you can see, definitely a lot of stuff on the camera. Again, maybe not the most high-end camera ever, but in general for a more affordable entry-level phone, I do think we are getting some good stuff here. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Honor X8a 5G, first of all, as the name implies, this is a 5G phone. So if you are looking for that 5G connectivity, then this phone of course will be a great choice. And at this point in 2023, while on one hand you can definitely still survive with a 4G phone, I personally have seen some surprisingly decent 4G phones myself. But despite this, I feel like if you really are going out of your way to get a new phone, if you really want to maximize the value you're getting for the money, you might as well get something that has access to your carrier's latest and greatest network. And in that case, you will want a 5G phone. Now with this phone, we are getting 4 GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 Plus processor. Now keep in mind, despite this phone in this video having 4 GB, this phone does have another variant that has 6 GB. But again, to avoid any potential confusion, the one in my hand does have 4. Now in general, based on my experience so far, the performance on this phone is pretty decent. Sure, on one hand, it's definitely not the fastest phone in the world, but in general with a phone like this, you can really only expect so much. And for what it is, I would say it is pretty impressive. For more basic activities like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and maybe some light mobile gaming, I do think this phone will be a pretty good choice, and I personally haven't had any lagging or slowdowns or really any performance issues at all. So overall, performance-wise, I do think this is a pretty solid device. Now I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be a performance upgrade for you. Because of course, depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not be. But again, in general, in my experience, for more basic daily activities, I would say this phone is plenty fast enough. And in general, comparing these scores to a lot of other phones in this price range, I would say overall, it is definitely competitive. Now for the battery, we are getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 22.5 watt fast charging. So definitely a great battery here. When it comes to charging speed, provided you have a good enough fast charger, it will charge up decently fast. And with the 5000 mAh battery, you can expect to get great battery life both throughout the day and down the road as it degrades. So if battery life and longevity is important to you, then the Honor X8a 5G will be a great choice. In addition to this, I do want to point out that with this phone, we are not getting wireless charging, and while on one hand, even at this point in 2023, wireless charging is really a feature mostly only higher end devices have. If you are coming from maybe an older device that does have it, and you're expecting every phone at this point to have the feature, again, just keep in mind, this phone, along with most others in this price range, does not have wireless charging. But again, in general, the battery, both in terms of charging speed and battery life, is really good on this phone. So if that is more of a main concern for you, then I do think this phone will be a great choice. Now for the software, with the Honor X8a 5G, unfortunately this phone does only have Android 12, and at this point in 2023, we are getting pretty close to Android 14, so the software is definitely a little outdated. But at the same time, like I said before, I really haven't had any performance issues. So on one hand, if you're someone who really wants the latest version of Android, then of course you will be disappointed here, because again, we are only getting Android 12 here. But again, in my experience, with Android 12 and Magic UI 6.1, I really haven't had any performance issues at all. And with phones like this, the more entry-level, affordable devices, sometimes you do get some lagging and slowdowns, even with a pretty good processor. But again, with this phone, I haven't had anything like that. So in general, if maybe you're not really that concerned about the actual software, and you're really just looking for something dependable that gets the job done, then in that case, I do think this phone will still be a pretty good choice. As far as other features go, with the Honor X8a 5G, we are getting NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, then you'll be happy to know you can do that with this phone no problem. Now taking a look at the overall device itself, I do think it does have a really nice look, despite technically being made entirely of plastic, except of course the glass display. The build quality is really good, so definitely more of a solid device, and it has a surprisingly decent amount of weight to it, so overall, despite not maybe feeling premium per se, I do think this phone is well built. built. The back has this kind of rainbow finish, and in addition to having a really cool, kind of unique look, it also doesn't really pick up fingerprints, so definitely great here. And remember, this phone does come with a case, and I do recommend using it because even though, again, this phone does have pretty good build quality, when it comes to phones like this that don't have any metal or glass or anything on their designs, they tend to not be quite as durable as, say, a $1,000 flagship phone. And because of this, using a case is definitely a good idea. On the left side here, we got the slot for the SIM card and the microSD card. On the bottom, we got a 3.5mm headphone jack, microphone, USB-C port, and the speaker. On the right side here, we got the power key, which again is the fingerprint scanner as well. Volume down, volume up. At the top, we got the noise canceling microphone. On the back, we got the camera module, flash, and Honor branding right here. So in general, definitely a really well-designed phone, and I do think for what it is, it does look pretty nice. But in conclusion, my overall first impressions of the Honor X8a 5G. In general, I do think this is a really nice phone for what it is. Sure, on one hand, if you're looking for a more premium display, you might want to get something else because again, we are only getting a 720p resolution here. But like I said before, despite this, for the occasional video, web browsing, social media, stuff like that, I do think it will get the job done just fine. It's just when you're really on your phone a lot, consuming a lot of content, then you might want to get something nicer, but for the average casual user, it will get the job done. I was also impressed with the storage here. It does have quite a bit for what it is. The performance is also pretty good. It has a decently nice camera setup, and despite the software being again a little outdated with Android 12, I am happy to see it does have NFC and a really good battery too. So in general, if you're looking for an affordable 5G phone for more of the basics, then I would say this phone is definitely worth considering. Now for more information about pricing and availability, be sure to check out the link in the video description because this does change from time to time. And definitely stay tuned because I will be making a lot of other videos about this phone on the channel. But again, this is Andre here filling in for Kevin. This is the Honor X8a 5G, and I will see you in the next video.